don't truly understand how we affect the data that goes into any type of model we use. We all have our own biases, our own perceptions. We all see what's required. We all have clients. Anyone who saw the modelling for the East-West tunnel or the tunnels up in Brisbane know that there are biases towards certain financial goals when they did their user model. So instead of rabbiting on about psychological theory and what I'll use is very famous artwork. Who's heard of Las Meninas? You heard before, yeah. Las Meninas is one of the greatest masterpieces in the world. It's held in the Prado. It was painted by Diego Velázquez, sorry, who was the court painter for Felipe VI, who was the King of Spain in the mid to late 1600s. Velázquez is pretty much that mix between modernist, is moving into the modernist tradition and looking at realism. What he did was look at space and the linkages that we have, the linkages between the painter, who he paints in here, that's Velázquez himself, those internally and externally as the subjects, and ourselves as the viewer. There are 4 or 5 key points in this. And my point is, surrounding all this, is that they're all different influences. Some external within your client or within the user, some yourself, and some internal, and they all interact to create a data set that you put in. So, what we have here is the Infanta. She was the daughter of the king and queen. We have her chambermaids. The focus of the chambermaids is obviously always on the daughter. She's looking out towards somewhere. We're not too sure where or to who. It could be us, it could be someone else. However, in the background we can see in a mirror 2 faces who we recognise are the king and queen. So are the king and queen looking forward towards, and the Infanta has her attention taken from either her dog or her chambermaids taken towards you. We have at the back this little scene, which is always the most intriguing one that people always look at. This is the Chamberlain. The Chamberlain was they think is actually a relative of Velázquez, the painter. You can see the Chamberlain is standing on the stairs, 1 foot up. Has he come, his attention momentarily taken by the king or queen, or by the action? Or has he come down the stairs and momentarily stopped? Will he go up? Will he go down? Will he come into the room? We really don't know. It's up to you as the viewer to perceive, to make up what is this situation. And it's the same thing with Velázquez himself, the painter. Behind here we have a rather large easel. It's theorised that this is the same size as the actual painting. The actual painting is 3.2 by 2.76. It takes up a rather large space in the Prado in Spain. What's he doing? Is he looking up towards the easel, looking back to the king and queen? Hereby, this is a scene where this is a painting of the king and queen. And these people are here just merely for entertainment, because if you know, in the painting, when they're painting such a large painting, there were long sitting times in those days. Or are you a chamberlain with them? You've come into the room, and Velázquez himself is actually painting this one here. We really don't know. It really depends on the eye of how you see this. It's how you perceive the situation and the interactions, which is very much like the work you do all day, every day. how does that data, how do you take that data? We have inherent biases towards our experience. We're primed to work towards something that we always see. So we will see a different reality to someone else at all times. And this was the whole idea. We used this in a financial analysis subject at University of Sydney. We had a French philosopher, Foucault, analyse this in great depth due to these interactions, where you could find hundreds of different types of scenarios just from one single visual painting. And ever since I've taught this and worked with this, I try and look at the data in a visual way. What is it? Where is it? What's the likelihood of that happening? Should that be entered? Should that be an assumption? What about the rest of my team? How does my team approach that? What are their assumptions surrounding that? So, like I said, this is a complex artwork linking the artist with the subjects and the viewer. In your case, you are effectively the artists. You are putting together and modelling. The subjects are the data that you're putting in, and the viewer is the person, the end user of that. You can put yourself in various positions, and the outcome of that is very, very different. Also, there are complex interactions within that which we need to take into account at all times. Also, what about the subjects that you don't see? Are you the king and queen? What is their interaction? What with the data? What is interaction with them? Can you imagine a king and the queen walk into the room? Everyone stands still, looks up and bows. Is it the king and queen? Because not everyone's attention has been taken. You notice that? So who really is that person? People sit in the Prado and watch this artwork for hours. And they say that it comes alive. And it does. I've gone a few times. I'm going back in July to have a look at when my wife's doing some research in Spain, which is quite advantageous. The interesting part is the focus here is the Infanta. The Infanta is the daughter. She represents that hope, that future. And they believe that that is probably what he's painting here. They think that's what they think. That he is painting her for a future. Velasquez, in a lot of his paintings, puts a lot of perspectives and different perspectives. He uses multiple dimensions in his paintings quite a lot. And this is just one of this is the masterpiece. And it was a very, very important artwork in the use of space, as I said before. So, this isn't just about viewing one of the world's masterpieces. What it is a visual examination of where data comes from, or where anything comes from, really. We have complex interactions, and you always have to be aware of that. It's not always as it seems. Anyone who's done complex economic modelling with the various assumptions of reasonable people know that that assumption is no longer something that we can use, really. The whole development of behavioural economics and cognitive science has looked in and debunked this rational person type theory. So therefore, the information that you are coming, it's almost alive, and we need to see it as alive. And I use, whenever I go back, I look, what are the interactions between the various people? Like I said before, this is very subjective. You're making a decision of what this information is and where it's required. What is the information that you're going to place in? What are you going to cull? What's relevant? What's not? What's relevant to you may not be relevant, may not be relevant to another user. And it's really, really important to understand that, because when you come from a programming or for a macro background, we're very straight down the line. We're not trained to think as to what other people are thinking and maybe they could be very different for us. Another thing is we're guided by intuition. We have an inherent, they're called the planning fallacy. We have an inherent belief that what we're doing is going to work out quite well. So in project management, it's very important. That's because of the type of information that we have in front of us. And if new information is placed in front of us, we have a natural error, really, to believe that. We see that that type of information is correct. We see that, we place greater weight on that, and we discard other types of different information. So understanding that complex nature of it is really important. So therefore it's really important that we understand our biases, understand the type of information that we're placing into it. Otherwise, like in anything we do, it's effectively garbage in and garbage out. So I hadn't planned to go into huge depth. What I wanted to do is have a discussion with you, talk to you about your opinions on this and see if any questions surrounding that. Okay. So, what are your experiences within this type of information? Who has to make a decision surrounding the type of data that they have to put into their models? And what decision are you making? Like how are you making those decision processes?
Depends on the model. It's kind of hard to say, like, just
Yeah. That's right. Some of us said, well, I used to have it placed on us, basically. It was said, this is the result we want. Fill it. That was a bit of an ethical problem, especially.
You can save a little bit of time sometimes if you know what the answer is that they want before you begin the financial model.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that the answer you give is right.
No.
I mean, for example, budget modeling. So I do a lot of budget modeling, forecast modeling, and it's all assumptions.
It is.
You know, and it's usually, I do the whole model.
Yeah.
And then one boss, I can CFO and the CEO making totally different assumptions.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff.
It's quite fun. And the CEO, in business, the CEO who is the most positive and forward thinking is the one that's rewarded. There is a negative correlation between a positive and a confident CEO and shareholder value. They sort of tend to take you off on another tangent, and then suddenly, whoops, we didn't. But everyone believes them because they're confident.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like doing a revenue forecast. Salespeople are, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then CFO said discount about 75%, and then it's nowhere there, it's somewhere else. So
it's neither here nor there. Oh, with salespeople, you have to discount everything. They're inherently positive. We're going to do it. We're going to get there. And then the CFO was like, no, we're not. What am I doing here? Come on, I'm an accountant. I like to. And that's the problem, though, is because you've got salespeople who are forward-looking and you've got accountants who are backwards-looking. Where are we going to meet? So that's where you're in. You're a rock in a hard place. What type of information are you going to place in there? And that's why I always find that painting very, very relevant to any type of financial analysis, because it's the idea of perspective. What is the perspective? Whose perspective are you modelling for? Are you modelling for you to give the answers, or are you there as the tool to create the answers for someone else? You're the tool to create?
Excuse me, I don't like to call me such a name, but
Yeah.
I don't work that way, but before, when I did work, I worked in public partnerships.
Yep.
For maybe that mortgage, that team went to Babcock, so after that, like you give numbers for design and construction companies, so latents, let's say, and you got to put that at the model, and get the answer, and then the manager or the director says no, it's too high. Then you got to talk to the construction people, say sorry, because the main element that affects the price is construction. So yeah, and so you got to somehow tell them no, you guys charging too much. We need all by X. Otherwise, we've got no chance.
Yeah, and you're going to change. So we're also changed by revenue and also cost pressures as well. Do we have the cost? Do we have that? What can we do that? What? So therefore, you'll model all these different scenarios.
Yeah.
And which way do we go down? And which data can we trust? Really don't know. So therefore, the tools that you use are quite objective, but your work job is actually very subjective. And the business doesn't see it that way. They see you as, same with accounting. Accountants fill with numbers left, right and centre.
Can I ask a query?
Yeah, sure.
Do numbers lie?
Well, of course they lie. Every
Well,
single
no.
day.
Do numbers lie or do people lie?
And the numbers are used as a means for people to lie. Yes. If you read a financial report, they've got this lovely front page, and then the rest of it is the truth.
See. Okay.
So
Truth is buried in the footnotes.
it is always buried in the footnotes. Somewhere there, most people don't read it. Like the terms and
Hold on.
conditions.
Are you telling me that I can't judge a book by its cover?
Not this
That's
time.
ludicrous.
So yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can approach this. I guess in the short time I have here, it's more to make you aware of this. This type of stuff we teach over a full day in decision-making theory, especially market-based decision-making theory, which I find quite interesting, especially due to our biases. My favourite one is that give someone information. Say, for example, there's a shark attack. We know that it's a base underlying rate of it's more likely to be hit by lightning. But when there's a shark attack, our perception of the likelihood of us being bitten or eaten by a shark skyrockets up to from 3, 4, 5% up to sometimes 60, 70% in research. It's the same with air crashes as well. The safest form of flying's safest form of any type of transport. Have a plane crash, our perception of that happening skyrockets as well, because it's front of mind. So for these types of biases, we're quite fascinated in, especially in markets. My favourite one is within markets is the stock managers who have a good year, and then they extrapolate and they say they're the best. The correlation between a manager who had a good year that year and having one the next year is 0.1. There's no correlation, it's just pure luck. However, because they've had that good year, there's this belief that because they did, they're definitely going to have it next year. A bit like winning lotto. You're in with a chance. So this type of world is quite interesting. A lot of the universities now are taking behavioural economics, decision-making subjects through economics and taking away from that simple economic theory of a rational person into this dirty, interesting, irrational world of human beings. So I do recommend it if you are interested. Some of the, on Coursera, there is Dan O'Reilly from the US takes a really, really good behavioural economics subject. He's the leader and he actually still teaches that. You can do that for free to whet your appetite.
That's on Coursera.
Of course, yeah.
Is that for economics? Dan O'Reilly?
No, he's not for economics. He's Predictably Irrational is his book. And fascinating read. And it's all linked through into what I teach. So I guess, and that's some more reading. Obviously this was Velázquez Las Meninas is held in the Prado, Madrid. One of the greatest art collections in the world, and a fascinating visit through all the Spanish world. Further reading, people have heard of this, Think Fast and Slow. I think for any type of decision making, professional modelling is necessary. Black Swan, he pulled a lot from Kahneman. And also, Alain de Botton wrote an interesting book called Artist Therapy, which is a different way of looking at what art and pictures and images does to you. I think if you just read through the appendix and the references from this book, you're going to get a very, very good introduction into this world. Taleb was very, very good with Black Swan, but that is more focused onto trading. So, yeah, well, thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
So we kind of know, I mean, all these situations like that the management depends on what everyone wants as an output, right? Mostly, but there is no solution for it. Right?
No, there
isn't. As a modeler, just go with the flow, I guess.
You have to understand how different people approach it. So, you've got the CFO and the CEO pulling somewhere, the sales team pulling somewhere. So if you're modelling, you have to understand the different biases and sort of account for that, really. You'll know the people within your organisation, how they see it. It's almost like you have to be a communication person, which is not something that this discipline's famous for, is because, so therefore you're going to have to find a way to communicate that and explain it. Otherwise they're going to take their opinion and their perception of it, and they don't understand how you've tweaked the model and the parts of it. See, therefore your assumptions need to be properly communicated as well. So you have to get communicated. That's where you're at. That's why this type of stuff's so important, and it's not taught.
Others may have experienced different things, but I from my personal perspective, like, that sort of communication goes nowhere, depending on where you lie in the food chain, I guess.
Oh yeah, it depends where you are. It depends where you go.
Yeah.
But we're looking at developing ourselves for the future. Yes, and sometimes, like in any job, we just got to suck it up and accept it. But
I think I disagree with that. So I think by being the financial model, you have the tool to communicate in exactly how you choose to, by how you produce the model. So every model tells a story, and it's entirely up to the objective responsibility of the financial model to understand the story of that model and see it through the eyes of the person who's going to read it. And by producing that model, you are engaging in that conversation. By denying that you are part of that conversation is to say, I'm just a numbers person. And that's to defeat the objective of the financial model in the first place.
You can add so much more to it by being involved in the process and understanding the perspective of who is going to be reading it.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, like, it depends on, for example, in the world of M&A, you would understand that when you are trying to structure a deal, it's so the model, like from my perspective, from the historical trends, whatever the assumption that I made, the story may be entirely different to what all the other stakeholders want to see. For example, is what I'm trying to get at. At the end of the day, you just, when someone's trying to make a deal somewhere along the line, and then you just have to cave in and tell, okay, I agree with this decision.
and that's why most M&A deals don't make any value at all, because you've got different people. If you look at the history of it, the history of M&A deals, the only people that make any money out of investment banks, they take their percentages out of it. But the actual companies, if you look at it, a lot of decisions are being made basically to suit the ego of a certain person, key person within there, and there is actually no business case for it. So therefore you could present that. You may present them, and you're trying to change your data instead of saying to them, hey, you've got no business case. And in a listed organisation, that can be quite explosive, because if that suddenly got out and the market finds out that the executives were advised that there was no business case in this, suddenly you have class action heaven here. So therefore, in an M&A, I saw a lot of that. The output manipulated to certain stakeholders. In our case, the investment banks, so we got rather exorbitant fees. But the outcome wasn't anywhere near anything close to value. So I guess that's a different philosophical discussion surrounding ethics and our position within that as well, which is a completely different world to get into than perception.
You can imagine how many wrong decisions are made because of the way people view the model or assumptions about the model. So
Reading this is scary. You suddenly realise how we just don't get it. We're so influenced on very, very primal reactions to things. And our mind tricks us into making decisions. This whole idea of entrepreneurs that go into a business, you ask an entrepreneur, what percentage failure rate do you think you have? Oh, 30% chance it's going to fail. You actually look at it, it's about 90% fail within 6 years. They don't see that. They see that positive. We're positive, we're going to go for it. And that's when the CEO is rewarded for those types of things. Come on, let's buy this Glencore, let's buy Rio Tinto for exorbitant amounts of money, but we're already in huge amounts of debt. Oh no, but we have to buy it because what we're going to do is create cash flow and synergies, which will say, actually no, if you model that, it'll be split up within about 5 years.
It's a lot of it driven by emotions, yeah.
Yes. We are not rational beings, despite what you were told at economics school. We are definitely not rational. The assumption of a rational person does not exist. We are irrational. We make stupid decisions. We make different decisions. We make decisions. Who's heard about the saying that regret, we should not regret. Regret does not really exist. What we did was we made a decision with the information at that time and made the best possible one we could. Should we have further information later on, then we can make sure we don't make that mistake. What do humans do? We go make that mistake again. But we always have different influences and different. So it's very complex. So you start to see the data, start to see the information in a very complex world where you have internal interactions. You have the painter, you have the infanta, you have the chambermaid, you have the chamberlain. Then you have an external one, you as the viewer. You have the king and queen and the interactions between them. They're almost like your CEO and the CFO looking down at everyone and how people react to it. Some ignore, some don't. And that's why that painting symbolises what we're trying to teach. That's a nice introduction. So I do recommend for summer reading this, maybe this if you're a trader. So, perfect. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I just wanted to add the importance of documentation in your models. Just that it is absolutely terrifying, you know, as a financial modeler, to just to have people making decisions based on the outcome of your financial models, and because the models are only as good, the outcome of the model is only as good as the assumptions of what goes into it, and that's why it's so critical to make it absolutely clear and absolutely explicit what those assumptions were that went in, what perception you had, or who, you know, and the documentation of who you intend. Who did you write this for? What was the perspective? Was it for the purpose of a budget? Or was it for the purpose of a business case? Because that's very, very different assumption, very, very different way of building it. And it's very easy for a model to be misinterpreted as well. So that's where that's quite important as well. So thank you so much, Stuart. That's very, very interesting. We've got lots of really interesting topics coming up next year. This is the very last meetup for this year. The next one we have coming up at the beginning of February on capital raising from the banker's perspective. So that's a little bit of a different topic. So and we've got a couple of very different. We've got emotional intelligence coming up. Lots of different sort of unusual topics. So looking forward to all of that. And if the video turns out, I'll be able to get it onto YouTube. And I'll certainly, if you subscribe to get a copy of the presentation and the readings and recommendations, I'll send that through to you as well. So hang around, have a drink, and we'll catch up.
I'll put in, it's deep reading, but Foucault did an in-depth analysis of this painting, which is fascinating. What he pulled out, 8 pages of in-depth. The next one he looked at is Panopticon, which was the French prison. That was very interesting as well, where Big Brother comes from. But I'll send that through as well for you. So,
Thanks, Stuart.
enjoy. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.